I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Okay, so today we're going to go and see what's happening in the technical magician world of the recording and production studio. This is something a bit different, and I'm probably going to really embarrass myself at my total lack of technical wizardry. My guest today is a producer, engineer, and mixer, and works at the real kind of legendary Assault and Battery studios of Flood and Alan Moulder. He's built a mightily impressive list of clients that he's worked with: Jehnny Beth, Ed O'Brien, the Murder Capital, Celeste, Suede, Ride, U2, and latterly Kylie and Dua Lipa. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Richie Kennedy. Richie, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for asking me. I've been stoked to come and have a chat with you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So, I mean, tell me about Kylie. Just before we get into the kind of the mindset stuff, tell us about Kylie. That's a really intriguing one.
With the Kylie thing, I don't know how much I can tell you about Kylie. Is she sent over her vocal?
Yeah.
The way we had to do things, it was all kind of somewhat remote. So, the track I worked on recently, it was a remix of one of her tracks off her latest album, and extremely talented individual called William Bowerman produced and was MDing it as a live remix. So it wasn't essentially the often assumed method for a remix of like take the vocal, build a house track around it kind of thing. He was like, no, we want to get all live players, do it as a full live recording. And I think if the opportunity had been there, we would have been able to get Kylie and Dua live, but with the way things were, we did the live session first with all the guys. Then Kylie sent over her vocal from, I think, recorded in a home studio, and then later on in the week, Will was over in New York with Dua, and they tracked her vocal, and then we squeezed that into the mix on top.
Wow.
But yeah, it was super fun process, like just live reimagination of a track that was already there. And like Will's fantastic. I have to say, he like his vision was like so clear the whole way through that he was like very much like because he'd spent all the time like arranging and writing all the bits and pieces for it. Yeah. But was like fantastic at like getting everybody in the room kind of like vibed up and settled in. And then they were such good players as well. It was like, we needed to run through it a couple of times and they were already smashing it because they hadn't played together on it either prior to that day. But like,
wow,
it was kind of like a couple of warm-ups in, and it was like, we really just need to be tracking all of this now because it was gold.
Wow, that's really incredible. What an experience.
Very, very easy tracking gig for me. Like when the players are that good, I feel like you can throw any set of microphones up in front of them and it always just comes back. You're like, you kind of start questioning the relevance of your role as an engineer when the players are that good.
I mean, that's really interesting. I saw also that you've been sort of working with, I forget the name of it, but working with a tech company to develop this kind of new audio interface.
Oh yeah, that was with Avid, the guys who make Pro Tools.
Yeah, so I read the like the overview page, and I'm like, oh my god! I mean, I didn't understand a word of it. So that was like, I guess I'm like trying to say that you're in a pretty sort of technical business on the one hand, but also you got the kind of the relationship side, with the artists themselves. And kind of getting the best out of them. I mean, how is sort of technology sort of playing out now? And obviously, like last year has been significantly different for you guys and for artists, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we've become even more and more reliant on technology this year, I suppose. And like the interface is that thing there. It's the Pro Tools Carbon, and it's like yeah, it's like, so for like, I think the big angle with that thing was, I think, not, maybe not in response to like what's happening at the moment, but definitely like specifically to this year, but like how things are moving into like smaller scale studios, you know, that people
Mm.
are making like certifiably like really good music on their couch, you know, on a laptop at home or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this, I think Avid are kind of looking at smaller rooms and how they can appeal to people doing stuff on a smaller scale, or in a room like this where
Mm,
you can do quite a lot now.
mm,
Um, I'm very lucky in respect that I I have trained in big rooms as well, and I love that the environment of like being able to get an entire like band of people together and like a
yeah.
mass collaboration. Like, and in some ways, I find that easier, maybe because I've spent so much time doing it. But
Mm,
I love the situation of where you've got loads of minds in the room and they're all working towards one goal.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I suppose the crossover between the job and that, how technical it is, and then at the same time, like working with personalities and
Mm,
stuff like that, is like the easy thing about it is at the end of the day, a lot of us in the music industry, from like the technical to the creative to the artists, like we're all just a big bunch of nerds pretending to be cool, you know? Like everyone rocks up in their haircuts and leather jackets, but at the end of the day, we're all the kind of weird kids from school getting together to make something, you know? So it's not that difficult, you know. And a lot of artists are like they're getting more and more into the tech as well. So like,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, some people aren't. Some people are just like, and they're so focused on the musicality side of things, and but like the interchangeability between that, because like, you know, you can do so much on a laptop. So artists now want to know more
mm,
about the processes and the hardware and like
mm,
the emulations that they're buying plugins of, and they come into the studio and they're like, oh, it's a real one, like, and they want to play with things and they want to fiddle with it, which is kind
yeah,
of like the difficult thing I find about doing stuff in the box now is you're like missing that tactile edge of like actually
yeah,
like physically playing with units and stuff. But
yeah, yeah. So you kind of like you sort of throw everybody into that room, and there's a kind of like nerd overload
yeah,
of kind
massively,
of
massively.
stuff going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where did
And it's
I mean, you're kind of like sort of mind to me. So I mean, you're obviously like really kind of interested in kind of people and seeing the the ideas that people can kind of generate together. Where did that sort of for you? Where did that come from? Going back to your sort of formative years.
um I suppose like it probably from playing in bands. Like that's how I came up. Like
Because you're a
I
drummer, right, aren't you?
I'm a drummer. I I don't tell people I'm a drummer because I'm a pretty bad drummer. But
Modest with
but
it, I'm sure.
well, it's probably why I got into engineering so I could edit my own tracks. I'm not bad once I've had a couple of hours behind the computer. Um, but I think yeah, like collaboration was probably it's probably fair to say that collaboration was a bigger reason for me to get into music than getting into music. Like, I mean,
Okay.
I'll always remember like those early records in which made me buy a drum kit in the first place. Like a friend of mine, he used to have so many CDs. He used to always go down to hit, and he introduced me to so much music. A guy called Sean who lived on my street, and like he was way further into the scene than I was, and he was like showing me all these records, just like Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. And like
Yeah.
it all started to evolve from there. And I mean, I started playing late. I was probably like 15 or something when I started playing drums.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing that excited me the most was like when I started to play with bands, and then it was like, oh, like this is what it's all about. Like this hive mind of energy.
Yeah.
Um, and then being able to take that live or take it into the studio, that was the bit that
Mm,
really excited me was the collaboration element of it. And I think it's probably what steered me this way as well, of like constantly getting to work with like different people, like other artists or producers and stuff like that. And you get to like cherry pick like little bits of information or tricks or stuff that they do and constantly like build together. Like that's definitely the fun bit for me is collaboration.
How you like when you sort of started out and you were kind of, you know, being really kind of energized by all this, you know, this kind of collaboration and sort of activity. Did you were you kind of fearful? Were you like a little bit, you know, bit of trepidation going on, or did you just bowl in there and just do it?
I think I kind of just bowled in there and did it. Even before the music kind of thing, I was never someone who was like, I suppose, afraid to like just throw my head into something or like get involved. Or if somebody was doing something that I thought was interesting, I was like, I was the annoying kid that was always like asking questions, you know. I was always like, I wanted to know like why somebody was doing something and what they were doing or how they were doing it, you know. So no, I don't think I treaded lightly into it. I reckon I was head first from the start, I reckon.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, that kind of curiosity and you know, which I think is like so important. We have it as kids, you know, when we're kids.
Yeah,
you know, really sort of preschool and stuff like that, and then it kind of gets, for a lot of people,
whittled away,
kicked out of you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's like you know, forget all that kind of ambition that you had. You know, here's, you know, get your maths equations done and stuff like that.
Well, I think I was super lucky. Like what aided me in that is because like I was 100% on that path. I was doing a degree in chemistry and biology.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And you know, I had an interest in science. Again, it was just like an interest in like how things worked. But like in my teens, as music started to take over, not that I was bad in school, I did okay, but definitely my priorities started to shift.
Yeah.
And eventually it came to the stage where I was like, I'm not going to be happy if I end up like pushing test tubes around the
with
lab.
a lab
like,
coat on. Yeah.
I was like, there's elements of this that are interesting, but like, am I going to be happy? And I was like, I was super lucky in that when I told my parents, look, I'm not gonna do this, they were super supportive.
Brilliant.
Like massively in that like they realized it was like super open that I realized I wasn't going to be happy. And my dad, one of the things he always said was like, there's always work for people who are willing to work hard. So like, I think for a lot of people, especially in Ireland as well, like the idea of the music industry is like, you know, there's so many variables and there's so many chances it seems for it like not to work out. But I'm a firm believer in like what my dad said is that like you literally you make your own luck in a way, you know. Yes, you can get lucky, but you need to like put yourself in the situations in which you afford you that luck. And then be willing to work hard when it does happen.
No, go on.
Well, I remember one of the things when I first started working here, a conversation I had with Alan Moulder was he kind of explained like, look, things happen. You're going to get screwed over. Like clients will come and they'll go, or you'll get beaten down. And he like, you'll sink a bit lower every time it happens, and then you might get a bit lower and a bit lower, and then he's like, and then you'll reach the stage where you get so low you're like, shit, I gotta figure something out. I'm gonna have to do something else. I gotta go back to that other job or whatever. And you'll get a little bit lower again, and then something will happen, and then you just gotta work. Then you just like, you've got to take advantage of that situation and push. And it's like, I think that's massive because you kind of have to remind yourself of that when doing anything in freelancing, is that like, you don't have that security blanket, but like you can kind of make your own. within your own mindset of like always being willing to jump into something.
And has that happened to you? You know, where you've kind of like had the knocks and.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Like I remember when I first moved to London, it was me and another guy, Ian Flynn, who had taken me under his wing. He was the guy who, when I dropped out of uni, was like took me in and like showed me the ropes in studios. And then me and him moved here, like with nothing. We didn't know anybody in London.
Yeah.
I remember we'd flown over like a couple of months before to say like, okay, well, let's at least like visit the city once to make sure it's like not a total hellhole. But like, so we like moved here with no contacts or anything, just said like, we'll just put ourselves in the situation, get there, see what the landscape is like. And it was like, it was a tough first year, you know. We were getting around the place. We were like dry hiring studios, producing local bands. And yeah, there was like a lot of moments in which I was like, God, am I gonna have to go home with my tail between my legs here now, you know? But then things started to happen. And like the more we worked, the more bands we started to meet. Eventually, I was lucky enough to be able to come in here and do some work experience and meet people, and then the opportunity of a job came out of that, and it was like,
okay,
yeah, it was like, but definitely there was loads of moments in which it was like, do I need to do something else?
Kind of really sort of doubting yourself. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I think you know kind of like the sort of words of your dad, and you know how important, you know, depending on, you know, kind of what role, you know, your parents sort of have in your life, but if they have an important role, and then the, you know, the advice that they give you, and those, I think it's like it's really it is an important thing, and it can kind of affect your life. For me, for example, I think like my dad you know, kind of grew up with nothing. You know, he had no he had no money. You know, his family had no money when he was growing up. So for him, and he then basically kind of educated himself. He became a mechanical engineer, qualified, and all that sort of stuff. And for him, like, you know, kind of job security was kind of everything, because he hadn't had that. He'd seen that his dad hadn't had that. So those, you know, kind of through the generations, those sort of influences coming out. So when he was talking to me, he was kind of like, you know, you need to kind of make sure that you've got a secure job and stuff like that. And that stays with you. It's kind of sometimes hard to shake.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And so much of those lessons, like at such an early age, like so much of that has to come from your parents, you know? You're such a sponge of those those years that like those things get drilled in pretty hard.
And it's kind of like, oh, I can't go against them. You know, well, what am I going to do and stuff like that. So for you, that's brilliant. That you kind of like had that. Okay, I've got this desire to change. You know, music's really kind of calling me. I need to do it, and you've got the support and almost like the thumbs up to go and kind of find it.
Yeah, big time. And I think like the peaks and troughs in any freelance situation, though, it doesn't leave like as well. And I think that's always important to remember, is that like, you like, I'll meet people like, you know, people I would have read interviews with years ago, and then you meet them in the studio, or you end up being lucky enough to get in a job with them, and they're like, you know, massively established people in their game, and they're still hungry. They're still absolutely starving for it, you know, because they want it. It doesn't go away. So I think it's like, it's important, like at whatever stage you're at, to realize that like everybody's got that, you know, and it's like, and the peaks and troughs are like, the troughs are what kick you up the ass as well. You know, I think anybody in like, I'm in love with the idea of imposter syndrome. And how it affects us all. And I think whether you're in creativity or any kind of role, like talking to people who do loads of different things, like everybody's got a certain element of it.
Agreed.
And it's how you use it. Like it definitely can beat you down. But it's also the fire under your ass. Like without it, I think you're lost, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree that it's a very good
very
point.
necessary. Yeah.
I think it's that is. I mean, I think kind of imposter syndrome is really important. I agree with you. I think it's it's very, very common amongst in a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it shows like the kind of the power of. I mean, sometimes I think it's very valid. I think sort of particularly sort of women have sort of faced this. But it shows the power of the mind. And how that sometimes, for people who really don't have that, but see themselves as having this kind of imposter syndrome, it shows the power of the mind and how it can start to play its tricks on you. It's irrational sometimes.
Irrational, and it's one of those things you need to manage, isn't it? That like you can't let it take over in a way, and realize that it is part of the motivation. Like I'm not saying like wallow in the idea that you're an imposter, but realize that like we're all learning all the time, and we're all like making gains, like little or large, like, and that's part of it. That's part of it.
So in your time in the time that you've been in the studio, I mean, what have you gained, in terms of your, kind of, your mindset, your kind of attributes, what's it given you?
It's kind of hard to quantify, I suppose, because it's like one of those things. I mean, you spend so much time in the studio when you're working in there that you realize. I suppose it's. I sometimes think about like, God, like you're like doing a particular, or you're on a job, and like in the moment you can't really think about anything else but doing the job, and then you think, well, God, if I had been landed in this situation 5 years ago, how differently would I have done it? And it's funny, I listened to something I recorded years ago in my parents' house. Like, I think my parents were away on holidays, so I took that as a moment to like drag a band in and like record everything in the living room. And I was kind of like listening back to it, I was like, actually, this doesn't sound half bad, but was kind of like wondering like, oh, well, how differently would I have approached this now? And I think, that's a great question.
It's a hard one. I know it's
tough.
Hard. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the situations I've been put in here, it's afforded me the opportunity to work with like a much wider range of personalities. Yeah. And like, obviously people like at the top of their game, and being able to like absorb some of their skill set. And I suppose the more quantifiable elements are the technical things, so that how to do something in a particular way, or you get to absorb some of their skill set and like pick up things that they do. But I think those are maybe more of the more quantifiable attributes. Is that the technical stuff, definitely, that you can. I don't know if I've already said this with the cut or what, but that, like you know how to make a particular sound or record something in a particular way that you can then recall, or just even like bits of gear that you're then become very familiar with and stuff like that. But I suppose the other thing that's harder to quantify is like managing different personalities or egos or social situations, that like.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
I suppose it's like, it's hard to quantify, but I suppose it's just exposure, isn't it? The more times you're in the room, and when something kicks off, the more you like understand how to deal with it and keep the peace, or like or help somebody to like break through a barrier and things like that. It's I suppose hard to quantify, but it's definitely I think I'm definitely more at ease with those situations now, or like you panic less when it happens.
When it happens, and I guess with just exposure to that, to different people, you start to kind of almost be able to see when something's occurring
or about to
kind of kick off and things like that. It's like, okay, well, we need to kind of try and work out, you know, how you know, how, like, thinking on your feet, you know, how you're going to kind of solve it.
Well, it's got, the studio is like it can be an extremely like fun and like welcoming environment as well. But I think it's important to always remember when you're working with people, especially if the artist has written the song themselves, is that like this is their baby. And there's all the things that you need to remind yourself, is that like managing your own ego while allowing them to develop while recording and stuff like that, and realizing that like there's so much pressure on people as well in those situations. Like, it's their name on the cover. Is and depending on the subject matter of the song as well, it's like it can be incredibly exposing. Like, people often say things in songs that they'd never say in conversation, you know?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're about to tell the entire world this thing that they've never told anyone in person, you know? So you need to, it's a very, very delicate situation.
I think you've hit a really good point there around, you know, because, you know, something that is, I think, is really important these days, is this kind of like emotional intelligence, which is what basically, you know, it's kind of what you hit on there. It's like totally nail on the head. You have to be, you know, seeing things from the other person's point of view. So, you know, your artist who's kind of like, this is their thing, and you can take this into any kind of part of your life, thinking about, okay, well, if I tell them pretty bluntly, this is a piece of shit, you know, how's that going to go down? It's not going to go down so well, is it? So I think you've hit a really good point there about how you manage those.
And I think like you can like, I always strive to be honest as well in those situations. So it's not like you're going to turn around and tell somebody that something's shit. You know, you're there for a reason. You're more than likely you're in the room because you want to hear what this person has to say, or you're excited by it, or you know. And it's just, it's important to remind yourselves of like remind yourself of all the things that might be going through their head, but as well, like, understand that like they're working with you for a reason as well, and that it is a collaboration, and that like you can, like, sometimes like they mightn't always be ready to discuss something, but they have you there because they need somebody, or they want you to be there. Like, otherwise, you know, if like go and make an album on your own, which a lot of people do, and some, you know, there's a lot to be said for doing that as well. But like,
I mean, I wonder if like, sorry, no, Richie, go on, Richie.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say. I mean, I wonder, you know, and I'm not asking you to give anything away, but you know, times when you know, bands sort of come in and maybe not all of them are kind of on side with what's kind of happening, and you've got to kind of manage those sort of situations. You know, I mean that's kind of, you need a lot of skill to sort of handle those.
In the sense of that, like, you might have a situation which the label are putting the band into the studio, and the band want to do it a different way. I suppose that those situations can kind of present themselves, but I suppose it's I think I suppose I work with a lot of new artists, a lot of younger bands, and I think you see that situation a lot. Maybe not so in that. I mean, I've been lucky in that I haven't seen a huge amount of it where people just don't want to be there.
Don't want to be there.
But I think, but I think one of the things I see quite often is just managing the fear of like a big studio as well, of like, sometimes you'll have a band who have like, they've done some recording, maybe like in home studios or smaller setups, and then all of a sudden like a label gets involved and a lot of money gets put on the line. And all of a sudden they're in this massive room with like an engineer and a producer, and there's an assistant there, and they're faced with this situation of like, oh, now everybody's listening to my song and judging it. And I suppose one of the key things I always like try and get in early at the start of a session is that like the studio environment should feel like a safe space. And I don't mean like a safe space in that like you should just feel at ease there. And I think that's like, it's an important thing to try and achieve in any studio. And I think it's a big thing that attracted me to Assault and Battery, is that like it is the vibe that this place gives off. Like, yes, you walk in and it's like incredibly impressive in terms of like the room and the sounds and the gear and stuff like that, but also like there's this just super warm, homey vibe here, and a lot, and like most of that I think is due to the people here as well, you know, and that it's a fun place to work, and that you bump into people in the hall and everyone kind of bounces ideas off each other, and it's all very open door. And it's, I think, but it's just that is one of the things that I think is like paramount, is like as much that as there might be a lot at stake on a session, but you kind of have to ignore that. And I think that's kind of one of the things I started thinking about when you were explaining the idea of this podcast, of like experimentation, be it in your life or your career or whatever, but like in the studio, you kind of like need to forget everything that's on the line in order to like open the doors of experimentation in a way that you can kind of like, okay, I know it's like this time of the day and we have this amount of time and we haven't got it done, but it's like, maybe what would happen if we go down this rabbit hole for like, let's give it a couple of hours, you know, let's like sink into this idea for a bit.
I remember, that's a really good point. I remember reading something that from back in the day that Billy Corgan said about Flood, you know, which was basically he sees things, he has this kind of vision and these kind of ideas that nobody else has, and will suggest, and that's basically kind of what you're saying about working there. That this kind of that whole kind of ethos gives you this kind of basically like kind of open book to be able to do things and kind of like say, well, okay, let's try it. Let's I mean, you know, like you say, the experimentation. Let's kind of try it and see if it works. And like, so like oftentimes like your role as a producer is sometimes to like, one, tell people when to stop. I think that's like huge. That's like what a lot of people need, of like, it's good, you know, it's good, you can stop doubting this. But like, one of the things like Flood, I've seen him do so many times, is like the idea of like pulling the bottom brick of like, you know, everyone's like been bashing their head against the wall for hours about this one thing, or like there's that one problem track on an album, and like Flood will just like delete the drums, you know. He's like, it's like, well, what if we did this, you know? And like from early doors, like seeing somebody like do that, I was like, whoa! I was like, this is crazy! Like all of a sudden, like the world had been turned upside down, and like what my perspective on like production is, like all this, like, do you know, that you're like carefully refining stuff the whole way, which he's also great at, but as well just being like, no, let's start again. You know, like this obviously isn't worth. We're trying to raise this thing from the dead. Why not just like turn it into something completely different? So that how does that feed into you in terms of like, you know, kind of like how you differentiate yourself? In what sense? From like. In terms of the, you know, when you know, as sort of Richie Kennedy, you know, what he's done there by kind of taking that sort of brick away. I mean, that's a to me, that's a real kind of differentiator, from your regular kind of guys. And that must feed off, and you think, okay, this is how adopting this kind of mindset, how I can differentiate.
I suppose like it's like, so how do I differentiate myself? In that, like, what? God, that's a tough one.
That is tough. Yeah.
I think. God, I don't really know. It's a case of that.
It's a bastard of a question, this.
I'm not going to lie. I did see this in the notes beforehand. I was like, God, knowing it was going to come up, and here I am. I suppose I've like been super lucky in that I've been stationed primarily in Flood's room for about 5 or 6 years now, which is like, yes, I've got to work a lot with Flood and like see his tricks and stuff like that, but as well, I've been the guy in that room. So when Flood's not working, I've been able to work with like loads of different people. So like, even like within this building, you've got Flood, who's like known for being like the master of like those bold moves, or pulling the bottom brick, or like turning. And then Alan, who comes from like they both came up in the same in similar studios and worked together a lot, but like would have a completely different, not completely different, but I think like the part of the reason why they work so well together is that they were both very good at different things. And I suppose I've been able to working then again with people like Alan or Catherine Marks, and a host of whoever's come in. I suppose I've taken elements of all of their things. I couldn't. I still can't tell you what. No, I think it's my differentiating.
I think it's. I mean, I find when answering those sort of things really difficult, because it's hard to kind of look at yourself. But sometimes it's the sort of the small thing, or what you may think is the small thing for you, but for somebody, for the person that's kind of receiving that's a kind of big thing. Even if it's like just like your approach. The way that you kind of handle people, that can be, just putting somebody at ease can be a massive boost, and reason for coming there and using you.
Yeah. I think what I like, one of the things I think I strive to do, and I've probably touched on this already, is opening up the room because I'm so fond of collaboration. I always feel like whoever's working in the room, like there's a reason they're in the room, and everyone should have a voice in that situation. Like, and I think some like loads of bands are like, there's always different politics within a band. Like you'll have benevolent dictatorships, or like complete democracies within a band, or sometimes it's one person and everyone else follows that lead or whatever. But like everyone's there for a reason. And I think one of the things I try to do is promote that idea of collaboration on a session, and like, get everybody involved, and whether it's on the big task or everything else, it's like one of the things that's always quite fun to do, if you've got the time to do it, is to squirrel people away in different stations as well, of like, if you can have a situation where there's a track, and it's like it's almost impossible that it's been like tried in so many guises, and like you've got everybody in the one room. Sometimes it's cool to like put everybody, like someone give somebody a piece of gear they've never used before, like the drummer always sat behind the kit, give him a drum machine, or give him a sequencer, or like what might breed from that. And then everybody go away and then come back with all their tools that they've amassed and this new skill that they have, and then see what can be birthed out of that kind of thing. I always find quite exciting.
That's really interesting, sort of doing that, and I mean that's kind of thinking really differently, isn't it? I think that's
yeah. But allowing everybody to think differently, I think,
think differently, yeah.
Of like, oh, you're not just the bass player. You don't have that one job. Like, just like opening up the doors, and you can kind of like find things in people that maybe they hadn't explored themselves.
Yeah. That's a really exciting way to do it, because I mean, then you are opening up just so many more sort of possibilities for what the artist, what the band can kind of create.
Yeah, and the kind of the scope of the sound then kind of like, and I mean it's not always the best thing to do, but it's oftentimes when faced with a difficult situation, it's something. Sometimes people just need it to be told, look, you can try something else, you know. You don't have to do this way, you know.
And I guess that you know what you mentioned earlier about, you know, sort of taking people off, you know, and sort of squirreling them away for a little while. You know, you really, you know, trying to get the best out of them. You know, observing that this setup might not be working for them, so let's kind of try something different.
Yeah,
and you know, I think those sort of tricks in kind of life are often missed. You know, sometimes it's like, okay, well, this is the way that it's going to be, you know, and it's kind of like sort of put into a sort of compartment in the box, in a framework, and that's kind of it. You know, and you don't always get the best out of people, but you know,
and
letting them kind of flourish.
Yeah, and you do. It's trying to stop anyone's confidence being limited as well, I suppose. In that, like, just you got to be an enabler. You know, that's like primarily your gig is like help this person to get this across the line,
to get this across,
and like, and just allow people to realize their potential. You know, because it's so easy. It's like we're all inhibited in some way.
Yeah,
but all it takes sometimes is somebody to go, no, like take the time, like go off and like just have a moment and like try that, you know. And I think like one of the things I like, or a good way also of doing that is putting yourself in the situation and not to be afraid to like, when collaborating with someone, like try something. Like, you know, I'm not a keyboard player, I'm not a guitarist, but like sometimes if I have an idea, I'll just like really crudely try to bash it out for someone, and like it's a mess, like it's a total mess. Like I can't play any of these instruments, but I'm like someone will see you like struggling to try and like get this thing out, and then realize, oh wait, maybe it's this, and like, but it's the process of like you putting yourself on the line sometimes can open up the door for someone else.
I mean that's a really good point as well, that, you know, of how to get the, you know, of how to show yourself, you know, how to show you that you know, you're not afraid of showing any kind of vulnerability, that I can't play this, but I'm going to show you what I'm thinking, you know, the idea. You know, that helps people think, okay, well, this guy's like, you know, he's real, you know, he's a real kind of human being. He's kind of showing the same kind of stuff that I feel about when I get behind the drum kit, you know. You can relate like to it.
We're all scared, you know.
Like, absolutely.
As I was saying, we're all those weirdo kids from school. Like, let's all be scared together and just make a fucking record, you know.
So if you've got, you know, one piece of advice or kind of like some words to, you know, for anybody that's wanting to, you know, make some change in their life, or to kind of like, and has got some kind of obstacles that are stopping them from doing it, what could you say to them?
I think I suppose it's easy just to say go and do it, but I think one thing I've realized is you don't have to always close doors to open other ones as well. So I think what sometimes holds people back, and and like things that have definitely held me back in certain situations. It's like, oh, I can't do that because I'm doing this, or how am I going to afford to do that? Or like, because oftentimes the situation in the freelance game is like you end up doing stuff for free, which like in essence, you shouldn't. And like, you do, one of the key things is you do need to realize your value.
Yeah.
But you do, there's certain situations where you do have to do something for free, or if it's worth bridging a gap, or if you need to get something over the line and long run, it's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
But just because you're doing that doesn't mean you have to like close another door. If you're working in a job right now and you really want to like do more in the creative industry, like you can start doing those things. Like what are you doing in your evenings? What are you doing in your weekends?
Yeah.
You don't have to sacrifice everything, but maybe you could sacrifice something to allow yourself to do something else.
Yeah.
And then you can slowly allow it to develop or to move. And then, yes, you might come to a point where, you are going to have to like put the axe in something. But there's no reason why you can't be making small moves the whole time. People always say to me like, oh God, I wish I had like learned an instrument earlier or whatever. And like, it's going to be a little bit harder. Like obviously like kids like, kids annoyingly pick things up like ridiculously quick, and it is a lot easier. But like, what? Surely there's something that you feel you could like watch a little bit less I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and just pick up a guitar for half an hour. Like it's easy done, and you'll probably get more out of it in the end.
That's
in fact, I guarantee you'll get more out of playing guitar than watching I'm a Celebrity.
Richie, that's brilliant. Thanks so much. That's really that's been fascinating listening to you talk, and
that's been great talking to you.
Thanks so much, mate.
Some tough questions.
Tough questions. I'm going to go back to all those technical specs and see if I can understand them now.
Thanks very much, Joe.
Right, cheers, mate. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.